Okay, so I think I am live, and then because it's raining where I am, the um, the internet is very, very, very bad. So I don't know what it's like on your side. I'm sure it's also very bad on your side. Okay, so today I want to do this video because this video, I was watching on YouTube. There's this, I think it's South African podcaster. It's called Biz News, if I'm not mistaken. He interviewed this guy called Joel Pollack. Now, as far as they're concerned, Joel Pollack is probably the next USA ambassador to South Africa. Okay, later I will link the actual video below so that you can go watch the video, because in the video this Joel will explain who he is. I'm not going to explain who he is because it's quite a long thing. Now, okay, if I'm looking, yes, because my cat is being naughty down there. Okay, so yeah, so this, I mean, of course, Joel Pollack, you can understand he's going to be US ambassador, blah, 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 blah. So this guy is on a different level from me, okay? Different. I am a mere layman who, citizen, voter, I'm just in that class. Okay, so just to put it out there, disclaimer out there, I'm not an expert. I'm just giving you my thoughts and opinions on what was said during the interview. Now, the reason I'm doing this video here is because every time I try to comment on the video, they would delete my comment. So, and I'm not the only one who said this, because when I did say, why do you keep deleting my comments? Then somebody said, yeah, they keep deleting mine as well. And then we notice that they delete comments that are in disagreement with what he's saying, or that's not following the narrative of the video. Because the video is very pro-USA, pro-Trump. And the way I see this channel and what I've been seeing on social media for the past, I don't know when this debacle in South Africa happened, I think a week. It's been the algorithms have been pushing very pro-USA, pro-Trump, anti-ANC, anti-South Africa. Like, South Africa's now the bad people, we take turns. It was Russia the other day, and then it was Palestine, and, we take turns. Say China, and now it's South Africa, okay? Our turn, which is very weird because, I mean, who are we? We're not even an important country, but I'll get to why it's us. Okay, so anyway, this is what we notice. And what I notice, like I say, is there's this narrative also going where everything has to be very just pro-Trump and pro-USA. Nothing else. Nothing. The minute you say something that doesn't gel with the narrative, you're in the bad books. And so I'm doing this here so that people know, and I'll put it on my YouTube, and I'm putting it here so people know this is going on. You must take note. This is going on. Anyway, so I will put this on YouTube, and there will be timestamps. So all you do is you follow the timestamp. Now, okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to play the video. So the first question that was asked was the interviewer, his name is Alec, because I had to cut some things, otherwise the video is too long. He asked them, what should we be expecting from Donald Trump? So if you see DT, it's Donald Trump. And how well do you know Donald Trump? This is the first thing he asked him. So let's hear what he says. Okay, so yeah, what should we be expecting from Donald Trump? How well do you know Donald Trump?
Well, in a sense, I know him very well. And in another sense, I don't know him at all. I mean, I've followed his entry into politics very closely. I've written several books about his presidency, about his policies, about his campaigns. So from that, on a personal level, I don't know him that well at all. And I'm a big fan politically, but I don't hang around Mar-a-Lago and so forth. I'm not socially in the mix. I just do my thing out here in California, focus on my job, my family, and the bigger debate.
Okay, so the next question is, why is Donald Trump so interested in South Africa?
Well, I think it's for a number of reasons. First of all, I think that Trump is interested in making America stronger and more economically powerful. And he sees the challenge that China is posing to American interests on the African continent and specifically in South Africa. That's a challenge both economic and military. The America First philosophy that doesn't mean a complete withdrawal or isolationism. It does, however, mean that America's economic at the top for Trump. And he has had an interest in South Africa mostly for that reason. Also, keeping in mind that there are many American companies that have investments in South Africa or that would like to invest in South Africa but cannot do so or feel vulnerable if they are exposed to some of the political risk in South Africa. So I think he's taken an interest from that point of view. In the last few years, South Africa has also really been aggressively attacking American allies and American interests on the world stage. I mentioned China, the essential expulsion of the Taiwanese embassy from Pretoria was something many Republicans noticed. The cozy relationship with Russia during the invasion of Ukraine. And of course, the ICJ case against Israel, where South Africa essentially defended Palestine. That caught the attention of people in Trump's circle and certainly Americans in general. Democrats actually wrote in 2023 to President Biden at the time, asking him to punish, helping, of course, agenda. China is at the top of Trump's agenda. So there's been a steady loss of patience with South Africa's foreign policy positions. And I think you take those things together with some of the economic uncertainty around the Expropriation Act, I think it led to Trump taking a very public position against South Africa's foreign.
You heard what he says. The sound is a bit bad, so I don't know how this video is going to go. Okay, so this is what I answered. I responded. This is what I wrote in the comments, but of course, because they deleted my comment. So about that, this is what I said. I said, we have to put South Africa's interests first. We have to stand with RSA. So RSA means Republic of South Africa. And not, for example, with Ukraine, who is known to have neo-Nazis in its government and military, and who was persecuting and killing people in the Donbass. We have and will always support the Palestinians in their struggle for freedom, because as South Africans, been there, done that. One of the mistakes which some political analysts make is to think their enemies should be our enemies. That's a quote from Nelson Mandela.
At the top of their agenda, in the same way that China is at the top of Trump's agenda. So there's been a steady loss of patience with South Africa's foreign policy positions. And I think you take those things together with some of the economic uncertainty around the Expropriation Act, I think it led to Trump taking a very public position against South Africa's foreign.
As for us supporting terrorism, us meaning South Africa, one man's terrorist is another's freedom fighter. Mandela was a terrorist for white South Africans and for the USA. And this was for the USA until 2008. He was still registered as a terrorist. But for the non-white South African, he was a freedom fighter. So what is terrorism and who is the terrorist? It is a matter of perspective. South Africa, Russia, and China are BRICS nations. So it goes without saying that South Africa has to have good relations with Russia and China. And I don't know why the US is worried about Russia and China and South Africa being friends and that they are BRICS, because the BRICS summit this year will be held in July in Brazil, and this is on the agenda for the summit. The first thing is they are not going to push for a common currency. What the agenda would ease global payments, reduce dollar reliance. Okay, they want to reduce dollar reliance, but they are not pushing for a new currency. And they're going to discuss cross-border payment systems. That means systems amongst each other. Okay, now this that BRICS is doing is good for South Africa, as it's best not to be totally dependent on the US dollar, because the US can hold the country hostage because of this dependency and punish it if it does not toe the line. As for the Expropriation Act, especially the expropriation without compensation. Okay, so I don't know much. I cannot really talk too much about it because it is quite complicated, because it doesn't matter what our government decides, it's not going to go down well. Because if the government decides to go what is good for the previously disadvantaged individuals, which means, well, as the act stands now, if they leave the act as it is, because the act as it is going to benefit the previously disadvantaged individuals. So if they go with that act, we can see it's not going to go well because the US doesn't like it. But if our government goes with they change the act or they abolish it, which will benefit the present disadvantaged individuals. So the previous disadvantaged individuals would be the non-whites. The present disadvantaged individuals are the whites. So if the government now goes with the present ones, they still don't have a big issue, because the majority of South Africans are not going to be happy. So our government has to decide, do they please the US? And we lose all whatever deals we're going to be getting from the US, and we're going to be punished with sanctions and tariffs. Do we go with that? Or do they go with what the present disadvantaged people want, and then unleash the wrath of the majority on them? They have to choose. But whichever way, it's not going to be good for them. Well, and it's not going to be good for us, whichever, because one is going to be a war and one is going to be not dealing with the US, because apparently it's like so important that we have to deal with the US, but I don't know. Okay, and then the other thing is, because there is this problem of the Volksstaat, which is this, that the Afrikaners want their own independent state within a country. The ridiculousness of that is beyond me. I don't know how they think that any government in the world would allow a group of people to set up a state, an independent, like, little country within that country, and on top of it, it is a whites only state. And you're trying to do this in a predominantly black country, and you're doing it on an African continent. It just doesn't make sense at all. But wonders never cease, right? It never cease. Because you see, the thing with the state is, it doesn't say whites only. Well, in a way it does, but in some books it says, but the AfriForum says no, it doesn't say that. But it is a Afrikaner only state. An Afrikaner is a white person, a white South African of European descent. So it is a whites only state. And the problem with the state is that the reason why the Afrikaners want this is because they don't want to be part of South Africa. They want to be in Africa, but they don't want to be part they want to also be in South Africa, but they don't want to be part of South Africa. But they want a part of South Africa so that they can live apart from South Africa. They don't want to assimilate in and integrate with the rest of the nation, but they want separateness. They want apartheid. Because apartheid means separateness. Apartheid is the Afrikaans word for separateness. Now, this is not a workable solution because we are one nation. We are one South Africa. And we must work towards being a rainbow nation. This was our plan, to be a rainbow nation. So what is a rainbow nation? Rainbow nation, so the term was intended to encapsulate the unity of multiculturalism and the coming together of people of many different nations in a country once identified with a strict division of white and black under the apartheid regime. In a series of televised appearances, Bishop Desmond Tutu, may he rest in peace, spoke of the rainbow people of God. Before we were separated by, there was a strict division in our country. We don't want that anymore. But the Afrikaners want that. They don't want the rainbow nation. They want separateness. They want apartheid. And unfortunately, there is no place for this in South Africa anymore because the apartheid is over. What is the relevance of Simonstown? Now, this is the next question he asked, because Simonstown is a port town in South Africa. Let's hear what he has to say.
And domestic policies. And the reason it's important strategically is for the same reason that South Africa has really been important for half a millennium, which is that it is situated near the confluence of the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. And particularly as the Indo-Pacific becomes a chessboard in international relations, very important for trade, very important for military affairs, Simonstown has achieved an elevated importance. And of course, it's been, despite its small size and its tranquil nature, it's been a point that's been fought over or strategically important to empires for centuries, whether it's Napoleon or the British and so forth. And it remains important. Even though it's a small port, it can be expanded, and it is an important naval station in this entire game of the Indo-Pacific. So there is a tremendous amount of interest in what China might do if it gains influence on the African continent, and what it could do to South Africa, not just to the United States. But, you know, the pattern in Chinese relation is that China will lend money to African countries and then come to collect terms of that debt, which are often very unfavorable to the borrowing nation. And it will seize key assets, usually ports, airports, mines, infrastructure, that sort of thing. So there's a real concern that South Africa's closeness to China could lead to China either taking over key strategic assets that are important to South Africa's economy, or taking over military installations that are important to maintaining peace around the world, which is fundamentally what the United States wants to do. The United States' global mission really is to keep things calm so that the global economy can grow, keep the lanes of trade open for free commerce. And China isn't necessarily interested in the same thing. China wants to control its sphere of influence, whether it's in the Western Pacific or now increasingly the Indian Ocean. And Simonstown is a key point in that endeavor.
Okay, so basically what he's saying, Simonstown is there. US is worried. China is gonna, South Africa is gonna get into such big debt with China, and then China is gonna take Simonstown, and then they're gonna build a naval base there, and then it's gonna cause havoc in the rest of the world. So basically what Trump is saying, South Africans, you guys are too stupid to know that China will do this. And because you are so stupid, we have to come in and we have to help you by not getting into debt and by not letting China take over your Simonstown port. So we will come in and we will help you by putting our military there to ensure that you are safe from China and to ensure that the whole world is safe. That's actually the story that's going on there. Because what does my government know? What do they know? They don't know anything. They don't know anything. Only the US knows how to work these things out. Only the US. Like, that's what they think, okay? That's the arrogance. Okay, anyway, so because this has happened in other countries. I can't remember which country. This has happened a few years ago, and this happened, and I think China still has the airport or the port or something of that country. South Africa's been doing business with China for 30 years. I think by now China would already have been able to do what they wanted to. Because as much as my government is corrupt, I don't think they are that stupid. I doubt that they are that stupid. But anyway, this is what I wrote, which of course they deleted. I said here, the problem with African countries and Chinese debt is not China's fault. You see, like this guy is talking about, and China will do this. It is the fault of the corrupt African leaders. China is a businessman, and like any businessman, will exploit the situation to its favor. It's our African leaders that must be blamed for being greedy, power hungry, and gullible. Right? Right? So China wants to come and do that. If they're greedy, that's going to happen. So they cannot be greedy and they cannot be stupid. But even so, the US has no right to come and interfere. But I better not say that because, this guy is going to be the next US ambassador, and then, I might need a visa, and then it's a problem. Okay, right. Okay, will RSA be able to meet with Donald Trump? And are we misreading Donald Trump?
As for the president and the secretary of state, I don't think they're going to have anything to do with South Africa right now, given the policy differences and, I'm sorry to say, the way in which South Africa's leadership has responded. It's not good to accuse President Trump of misinformation. That phrase is extremely loaded in an American context. You may quibble with one of that before, certainly in some of my editorial pieces and news coverage and so forth, but the left in this country tried to shut down news outlets like mine, and they tried to censor the president. They did, in fact, censor him by accusing him of spreading misinformation. The first time Donald Trump was ever censored by a social media company was when he did a press event with some doctors who were questioning some of the COVID restrictions and COVID masks and so forth. Those doctors turned out to be right, but at the time that was against the medical orthodoxy and the political program of the Democratic Party, and so they convinced Facebook and Twitter at the time to shut down the live stream and to censor those posts from Donald Trump, and by the way, from Breitbart, because we had a camera there. And that's the censorship that is associated with the phrase misinformation. There really is an attempt by the president's enemies to control him and the flow of information in this country by accusing him of misinformation. So when that word is used, for Americans at least, it triggers an association with the past 5 years of attempts to crush free speech online and elsewhere. Those are all being reversed now that Trump has been elected. They are a big part of why he was elected, because Americans stood up against it. But it was a big mistake for Cyril Ramaphosa to accuse the president of misinformation, and some of the other commentary hasn't been helpful. I don't think that this is a problem that can simply be smoothed over by going and trying to explain things the way the South African government sees them. The United States is well aware of how the South African government sees things, but I don't think the South African government has heard how the United States sees things in quite some time. And part of the problem has been that South Africa hears a lot of flattering commentary about 1994, which was a miraculous political development. But as one British commentator said, you can't really run on the fumes of 1994 for that long. People are concerned about the direction of the country. They're concerned about their investments in the country or their potential investments. They're concerned about China. They're concerned about South Africa's support for terrorism. And it really worries people. And it's refreshing, I think, to hear Donald Trump say what many Americans are thinking. And so some of the rhetoric coming back from South Africa has really been unhelpful. I also saw that President Thabo Mbeki said he was baffled by the change overnight in the Republican Party. It's not just a change in the Republican Party. Again, the Democrats wrote to President Joe Biden back in 2023. It was a bipartisan letter, but it was signed by Senate Democrats who are normally very friendly to Africa, and they are very, very concerned about the direction that South Africa is heading. So this is now a bipartisan issue. And if South Africa didn't get the message then, when President Biden was in office, they are certainly getting it now.
Few things. First thing, the guy said it's not good to accuse President Trump of misinformation. He is right and he is also wrong. He is right because the accusation that Ramaphosa should have made is that Trump was given misinformation. And I say that because the information that was given to him, the misinformation is the part where, for the Expropriation Act, a lot of people did not read it properly. So there is some misinformation in that. But the other big misinformation is this genocide that he was told is going on in South Africa. There is no genocide. I was there 2021 to 2022. I didn't see anything. My friends all live there. I asked them all, where's the genocide? They're like, what genocide? What are you talking about? Nobody knows what's going on. Nobody heard of white genocide. Nobody. Everybody who works with white people, they see them come to work every day. They see them there. Nobody has died. They've known them for over 30 years, over 60 years, they're still there. They have not been killed. They're still walking around. Okay, so I don't know. If it was a genocide, I'm sure a lot of them would have been dead by now. Okay, so like I say, he was given the wrong information, which is not fair on his part. Then the other one, why I say it's also wrong for him to say you cannot accuse the president. It's wrong because irrespective of how this phrase misinformation is perceived in the USA, like he said, oh, because they used it against Donald Trump, blah blah blah. It is an acceptable phrase to use in South Africa. We are not the USA. It's like the USA people don't understand. The world does not revolve around them. What goes on in their country does not necessarily go on in other countries. They got 36,000 genders. We only have 2 because it's different countries. It's not the same. Okay? So, yeah, so that phrase might be loaded in the US, but in South Africa, it doesn't mean anything. Misinformation is just what it is. If it's misinformation, it's misinformation. Okay? And then I said, but this is why everything must be fact-checked first. It's also a big mistake for Trump to accuse South Africa of bad things happening without proper investigation first. His people who gave him this information, they should first have fact-checked whether all these things are right, because it also doesn't make him look good. It doesn't make him look good at all. They've done it to him before when he was president the first time. I know because I've got a video on my channel where I defend what he said, because they were giving him wrong information, or they were giving him information that they didn't want him to divulge to the public. So these people who are supposed to give him information, they better first fact check it. And before they accuse South Africa of bad things, they better first investigate it. So the misinformation is going both ways, okay? And then the way the USA sees things is that when they speak, everyone else must kowtow to them. Like you see, like in this thing where he's saying, oh, but us in the USA, we feel like this and like this and like this. And then South Africa is not towing the line and South Africa is not doing this because we want them to do this. No, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. You cannot tell, one country cannot tell another country what to do. And the other country is not supposed to just kowtow to the US. Okay, and it seems that Cyril didn't get this kowtow memo, right? He didn't, because he didn't kowtow. He was too presidential that day. He stood his ground. We will not be bullied. Oh, you cannot speak to the US president like that. Why not? He wasn't being rude. He said, we will not be bullied. There's nothing wrong in saying we will not be bullied. Like if you had to say, oh, okay, my bossy, we will do what you want. It's just the opposite of that. So the opposite of, oh yeah, my bossy, that's what I want is, we will not be bullied. That's all. He was just being a president. That's what presidents do. As much as we don't like him, he was being presidential. Okay? And then what he said about the journalist he spoke about, the English journalist is Douglas Murray, one of my favorites. And Douglas Murray is right about what happened in, like when he says 1994, you cannot, something about you cannot ride on the flames or whatever, something like that. I don't know what it is, but anyway, he's right. 1994 happened. It was a good thing. There was no violence. We overthrew the country without violence. Very good, but it's finished now. Done. Now we need to move forward. Okay, so he's right. But in saying that, there is nothing wrong with our foreign policy laws, and the ANC actually almost lost the last election, but it was their foreign policy that helped them, because I know personally a lot of the people that I know were not going to vote for the ANC because they had it up to here with the ANC. The only thing that made them vote for the ANC was the ANC's foreign policy. And now they want the foreign policy to be thrown out. Please. Okay. Yeah, so if that is what saved the ANC and what the majority wanted, why should it change? The majority voted for it. Okay, so the BEEE laws, yeah, I agree, it should be amended. I agree. And for a fair compromise, I would propose that where possible, because some of it relates to investment, to business, but where it's possible, some of it should only be applicable to those born before 1994. And by the way, FYI, the Malaysian affirmative action laws are exactly the same as our BEE laws because we actually copied the Malaysian laws from the investment part to managing people, everything. So they prospering, people are investing still in the country, nobody's complaining. So I don't know why ours is different. I don't know why we are being treated differently. Question of the day. Okay, now again, disclaimer, I am not an expert in this, but a mere layperson. That's all, okay? Just putting it out there. Okay, going on. Recommendations that can be absorbed by the ANC. Let's see what are the recommendations.
Well, I like to look ahead to the end of something like this. I think in any endeavor, any challenging situation, you want to try to look ahead to what the end of it feels like. And if you can imagine where this ends up, the future that I like to imagine is some kind of agreement on the White House lawn, let's say, some kind of bilateral treaty between South Africa and the United States, setting aside AGOA and all of that, which is a very serious issue. We can discuss that if you want. But I sort of tried to imagine what it would look like if all these issues were resolved. And most of them involved South Africa changing its foreign policy, changing its BEE laws, dropping some of the labor laws that make it almost impossible for people in South Africa, never mind foreign companies, impossible to run a business, and liberalizing the South African economy while also making clear that it's going to protect private property rights, repealing the Expropriation Act and finding a more sensible way of eminent domain, which we have here in this country as well. I think South Africa has to make those changes. And if it does make those changes, I think there are some reciprocal movements that the United States can make. One of the things I've suggested, for example, is that the U.S. could support a South African Olympic bid to be the first Olympics held in Africa. I see that Egypt has taken an interest in hosting the Olympics. There's no reason that Egypt should be the first African nation to host the Olympics. There could be a significant investment from the United States in that. There could be investments in power generating capacity. There could be investments in solar energy and green technology and all sorts of things. And these investments can really change the lives of South Africans for the better. They can take advantage of certain natural advantages as well as the incredible skill and drive of the South African people. So I think there will be benefits flowing back in the other direction, but there have to be commitments by South Africa to make these fundamental changes. And then I think it's possible to imagine an incredible relationship. You could see Donald Trump, who's, I think, somewhat misunderstood and reviled, I think, in the South African media. You could see him becoming kind of a hero, because I think he can reset not just the relationship, but he can reset South Africa back onto a path of prosperity and unity.
Okay. So, just to put it out there, we hosted FIFA 2010, so, and we did it without the US. So I think we don't really need the US to help us get the Olympics if we wanted the Olympics. Actually, I think our people would prefer to have another FIFA. But yeah, I mean, we could do that. But I mean, when we did FIFA, I don't think we used the USA, so I don't think we need to use them again. Okay, but anyway, that's just me. So a few things before I forget. Let me just talk about. Okay, so all the things it spoke there, that we must change our foreign policy, we must change our BEE, we must blah. I've already spoken about that. I told you my opinion and what would happen. Okay, right. So he said Donald Trump can be a hero, and in South Africa, he can set us on a straight path, blah, 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 blah. I don't know about other people, but I don't feel that the USA can set us on the right path, because the USA is a Western white country. It's a white, used to be woke Western country. We are not. I think we have more in common with the East when it comes to culture, customs. I just think we have more in common with Eastern people, with like Southeast Asia, with Asia, even with even like Russia, this side of the world. That side is, and I'm a world traveler, so I see all this. The minute I get to Europe and that side of the world, I just feel strange. When I'm in South America, in Latin America, when I'm in Asia, like from Russia, that way I feel like I'm home. When I'm there in Europe, I just feel very strange. I feel very stifled. It's like I don't know. It's just so weird. It's just weird. So I don't know why the US is so interested in South Africa. Well, I think I do know why, but we mustn't be stupid. We have a good thing going with BRICS. Anyway, this is just my my opinion. Okay, let's hear what's the next thing. Jobs, jobs, jobs. How is Donald Trump best handled transaction-wise?
Perhaps you could just give.
Well, first
again,
you have to
then
show
some
that you're
thoughts.
willing to give him something of what he wants. The endless rhetoric, the attacks, we've heard it all. I mean, I saw a cartoon in the South African media by Shapiro portraying Trump as Hitler, which is about the oldest insult that's been thrown at him. I mean, we're so used to it already. It's offensive, but it doesn't help. And I think that South Africans need to hear what he's saying and take a few steps toward him. I think I would look at this Expropriation Act as a first step, because that seems to be the focus of his executive order. And I would see if it can be repealed or amended. And then I think there's a conversation that begins.
Okay, let me stop there. Okay, so calling Trump Hitler, that is really, it doesn't make sense because there is nothing about Trump that is racist. I have never seen him do anything that is racist. And I don't know why Hitler, because he's so pro-Israel, pro-Jew, so I don't know what they're talking about. I think people just throw around Hitler's name. It has reached a point where even I feel sorry for Hitler because everything is Hitler, Hitler, Hitler. A car can go down the ravine and then it's Hitler's fault. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't think that is just it's just not right because that's not Trump at all. No, sorry, he's not like that. One thing I can say about that man is not a racist. Okay, right. What was he talking about? Again, he said we must get rid of the Expropriation Act and all that. Yeah, the other thing why I think they so focus on the Expropriation Act is because him and Elon Musk, they want that the folks start to be in, well, and then the AfriForum and all these people, they want that area he was talking about just now on the west, where he said, I think there's a lot of fossil fuel, fossils and lithium and all that stuff is on the west coast of Africa. So they want to take that whole area and make it a Volksstaat because they're going to make a lot of money. And the Expropriation Act will cause problems for them because just when they want to make money, I think then the government will take it back from them or things like that. So it's an issue for them. And yeah, because Trump is in real estate, so of course he's gonna want his little hands inside our land. So I think that's why this is very personal to him. I think Elon also has issues besides the fact that he's white, so it's in the DNA. All us South Africans, we must admit that it's in our DNA. Racism doesn't matter what color you are, it's in our DNA. Okay. But also, I think because his issue, I think, is because Congo is a problem now because that area where they're mining they're using slaves, to get the cobalt and the stuff they use for his Teslas and for iPhones and all that for the batteries. That area is a lot of fighting going on there, and South Africa is working with Congo, defending them against Rwanda, and I think that's like a problem for him, for Musk, because where's he going to get his, for the lithium batteries, where he's going to get the lithium from? So, but we have it in South Africa. So I think that's what's going on. So it's like the Volksstaat going on, and then it's the real estate going on, and then it's the lithium batteries and all the cobalt and all that going on. So it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. And we're in the middle of this whole thing. Us poor people, they're in the middle, fighting each other on Twitter and on everything for nothing. Fighting because a few rich people want money. And if you know, this Expropriation Act is all the poor people that's fighting and protesting and blah, 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 and worshipping Trump there like that in front of the U.S. Embassy. It's not I didn't see one rich person there, not even one. All those people who own mines, all those rich white people who own mines and all the properties in South Africa, I didn't see them there. Okay, right, let's go on. What about the perception that Donald Trump is becoming a divisive figure in RSA? Yeah, divisive in his country, and then he comes to our country, and not even our own president has caused so much issues between people. I think the most divisive people in South Africa at the moment, number one is Elon Musk, number two is Donald Trump, and number three is Julius Malema. Not even our government is in the top three. It's weird. Okay.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, I haven't seen any polling data in South Africa, but the remarkable thing about Trump is that he has won a higher share of the black vote and the Hispanic vote in this country than any other Republican president going back decades and decades and decades. And he did that while running against racial preferences. You know, it turns out that many people simply don't want to be thought of as different or requiring special treatment or special concessions. People just want to show up and work, succeed, build their dreams. And that's why Donald Trump actually even won a majority of the male vote in the Hispanic electorate. I mean, so Black Americans increasingly like Donald Trump. Hispanic Americans like Donald Trump. A lot of people toward Donald Trump. So I would actually be surprised if white South Africans and black South Africans felt differently. In fact, some of the many insulting things I think that I've seen in the South African media were written by white people. Not that I view them that way or that we should, but you know, now that you bring up the issue, I sort of think about that, and I just don't matters. Donald Trump, I don't think at South Africa care about our identities as human beings, right? Everybody cares about it. Americans do, South Africans do, but we also transcend them. And in certain modes, especially economically, we often forget about them. You know, when we're working together, cooperating together, it just doesn't matter. So I think that there may be some truth to what you're saying. I don't know, but that's not an immutable truth. It certainly hasn't been in American politics, where Trump is increasingly appealing to voters among racial minorities who in this country are black, Hispanic, Asian, and other.
So let's see what I wrote. Remember, these are the things that they didn't want to, they deleted. Okay, so he was talking about the perception of Donald Trump in South Africa, like between the whites and the blacks. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, that's so bad. Okay, anyway, it's very late here where I am. Right. Donald Trump is a hero in South Africa amongst the Afrikaners. And I mean, we saw that when they were at the embassy there. It's because they're very thankful. He's doing good things for them. He's, you know, standing up for them, what have you. And then non-white South Africans, as far as I can tell, and that is from like my friends and then also online, they're quite neutral about it. For them, they don't really care. They don't talk about his personality. You know, oh, he did this and he did that and to this woman and that. No, they talk more about his policies, things like it's more like that, or just funny things he said. But it's not. It's not like they don't become personal about what he does. Okay, but anyway, so they like, this is the non-whites. They like some things about him, and then they don't like other things. Normal. And the same can be said about his policies. Some things they like, some things they don't like. Okay. But of course, if he starts interfering in our internal affairs, it will be an issue with the non-white people. Like if he gets his way and he gets our government to abolish or repeal the Expropriation Act, or to not support Palestine anymore, like anything to do with the foreign policy, it's gonna be very bad. Because I mean, how can our government kowtow to another government? They must take care of what we want first. We are the majority. We voted for them. So, and if we have to suffer because we get left out, then so be it. So be it, you know. But at least we stood our ground. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, if Donald Trump starts interfering in our internal affairs, it will be an issue. Even now, with the whole EWC, the expropriation without competition saga, the non-white South Africans seem to be happy that he has given the Afrikaners the opportunity. So you see, they're happy with him. They're happy that he's given the Afrikaners the opportunity to leave, as things are not good for them here. I mean, we can see that it's not good for them here. They complain every single day. It's not good. Why would you complain? If it's good, you won't be complaining, right? So I agree that it is tough for them here, especially because their dream of a false start will remain just that, will just remain a dream, because there's no way that we will ever allow it. So the opportunity Trump has given them to realize this dream in the USA is admirable. No European nation has come forward in support of their plight. Only the USA, and yet they are Europeans, right? Okay, I must disagree with him, because in South Africa, blacks do want special treatment. He said we don't want special treatment. People don't want. They do. And because they will be like, oh, we suffered the apartheid, so we want privileges, which is weird, because most of these people who want this were not even born during the apartheid. They were all born like after 1994. And then the whites, we want our own homeland because we don't want to assimilate. Again, it's mainly, again, in this demographic, it will be the older ones, the ones that grew up in the apartheid. You see the difference? In the non-white, especially the blacks will be the ones who did not even suffer under apartheid. They want to use it as a crutch. The ones my generation who actually suffered under it, we just like, yeah, it's over. Let's see what we can do next. With the whites, it's the old ones like my generation that want to hang on to the apartheid. And the young ones, they assimilate. They speak the language, they dance like the blacks have black friends. Sometimes the minute they open their mouth, you don't even know it's a white person. Okay, so it's very weird. Okay. And it's only the Indians, the coloreds, and the Chinese that are not involved in any of these issues. We are just there on the sideline watching. We're just watching. We're not involved. So in general, non-whites don't really spend a lot of their time like thinking about Trump, like whether they like it, they don't. Because currently the hero is Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso. That's everybody's hero. Okay? Right, let's go on. Almost to the end, don't worry, hang in there. Oh no, it stopped. Okay, how does South Africa show love to the new USA administration, and what kind of love can be expected in return? So how do we show that we want to deal with the US? What does he say?
Make love great again.
Make
That's my
love
favorite
great.
way of putting it. Look, I think South Africa should drop the case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. It doesn't cost South Africa anything to do it. South Africa is not going to win the case. The new presiding judge at the International Court of Justice is from Uganda. She's probably the most pro-Israel judge on the court, aside from the judge from the United States. And she actually wrote a quite brilliant dissent in one of the previous opinions. I think that would be a gesture that would go a long way. It would show that South Africa understands that that case has been a red flag for much of the West, even though there are many Western governments that have been critical of Israel for many reasons and critical of the war and so forth. I think that arguing to commit innocent people, which is what Hamas does, and that's what South Africa did argue, by the way. It didn't just argue that Israel was doing bad things. It actually argued
Wait, let me go
operating
back.
together. It just doesn't matter. So I think that there may be some truth to what you're saying. I don't know, but that's not an immutable truth. It certainly hasn't been in American politics, where Trump is increasingly appealing to voters. That would be a gesture that would
Sorry, wait.
right to use murder because of some so-called right to resist, which doesn't actually exist in international law. It's kind
Wait,
of made
sorry,
up.
I need to hear that again.
Together, cooperating together, it just doesn't matter. So I think that there may be some truth, for much of the West, even though there are many Western governments that have been critical of Israel for many reasons and critical of the war and so forth. I think that arguing that there's some kind of right to commit acts of murder against innocent people, which is what Hamas does, and that's what South Africa did argue, by the way. It didn't just argue that Israel was doing bad things. It actually argued that Palestinians have a right to use murder because of some so-called right to resist, which doesn't actually exist in international law. It's kind of made up. But really, to go and argue that there's some cause for which murder is acceptable is shocking. And it actually is internally, because how does the same government then come back home from The Hague and try to stop crime at home? It's really just a terrible signal. I would drop that first as a gesture of goodwill and then see if you can work out the other issues.
I get angry when I hear that. Okay, like how can, what do you say? Murder? I don't know what he said, but anyway, you see, when only the US can murder innocent people, nobody else can do that. That's what he's trying to say. Like, they can go to Syria and Pakistan and Afghanistan and Libya and all these countries and murder innocent people, and it's okay. But if other people do it, it's not okay. But we know that's just how it works. We must also get used to it already. There's one rule for the USA, and then there's one rule for everybody else. We're just not getting the memo. We didn't get that memo. Okay, so I totally disagree that South Africa should drop the case against Israel. We all know that the only reason the USA is punishing South Africa is because of this. We know that. The USA forgets we are a non-white majority nation who can relate to the suffering of the Palestinians. We can relate to not being seen, to be viewed as lesser human beings. Even if nobody else supports them, we do. Sawubona. I see you. We see them. We see what's happening to them. We see it. Even if the rest of the world can't see it, we can. It will cost us a lot of moral shame to drop the case. Even if we lose, we did what is morally right. This is not about red flags for the West. This is about acknowledging the worth of another human being. If the West do not think that Palestinian lives have worth, then so be it. So be it. South African non-whites can relate to their plight and support their struggle. Conflating what is happening in Gaza to the Expropriation Without Consent Act and crime in South Africa is preposterous. It's actually insulting. But I agree. The South African government must address the crime issue in South Africa. But in saying that, they can fight crime in South Africa and they can also support Palestine at the same time. That's what I've got to say about that. What kind of investments can come from the USA? Would it be in terms of aid?
No, it would be investment that expects a return. But I think there are so many centers of excellence in South Africa, even in incredibly difficult circumstances, that I don't think it would be difficult for American investors to identify places in which to invest where there'd be an expectation of success. And not just success for American investors, but as you mentioned earlier, jobs for South Africans. There are ideal conditions right now, for example, for some of the new technologies that are being used in green energy in the United States to come into South Africa. The Northern Cape is ideal for solar energy. The Western Cape has hydroelectric. There are all kinds of new nuclear technologies coming online that the United States can build in South Africa. And look, there are also ways of tapping into South Africa's traditional fossil fuel resources. And coal can be brought online. I know it's been very tough in South Africa with some of the coal generating plants going offline, even the new ones. But there are places for American investment that can really build South Africa's infrastructure and restore it to where it ought to have been by this point. And look, I'll mention the Olympics again, just because it's a focal point. People debate whether the Olympics are good or bad for a country, but it's really just how you approach them. And if you think about it as just a big sporting event, maybe it is a waste of money and you can end up saddled with debt. But if you think about it as a way of motivating a country to move its infrastructure forward, to improve its public safety, to make sure that its residents are employed, I think it can be of creating South Africans and Americans to work together. So I think there are so many different ways that investment can take place. And South Africa does have a lot to offer, but people aren't going to come into the country and invest if, for example, under BEE regulations, they have to hand over 30% of their company or whatever it is. It's just not going to happen. People may sympathize with South Africa's desire to redress the injustice of the past, but they're not going to subsidize it. And I think South Africa has to make some very fundamental changes before progress can be made.
Okay, so you heard him say Northern Cape and Western Cape. So that's where the place is. Northern Cape is where the Afrikaners want to have their folk start. And then they are also talking about Cape Independence, which is the Western Cape. You see? You see how it works? Okay. Before I read what I wrote, let me just, because it's in my head now. And then what he was talking about, the Olympics. Wait, I'll get to that because the Olympics and then Malaysia. Okay. So let me first read here. USA cutting off aid to South Africa is the best thing that could have happened. Like Gayton McKenzie said. Gayton McKenzie is our PA leader, Patriotic Alliance, but the Patriotic Alliance is also in the GNU, in the government now, because it's a coalition. Like he said, we don't have a sugar daddy any longer, which was the USA. So now we must find our own way. That's why it's a blessing in disguise. You see? I also think so. I think it's a very good thing. The problem is that sugar daddy so wants to control how we do it. South Africa welcomes investors, but we are not going to sell our souls to the devil. That's what I'm saying. Okay, so the Olympics and how it can benefit South Africa. Now, what he was talking about, right? So what he was talking about, this is what happened to Malaysia when they hosted the Commonwealth Games in 1998. I saw that country go from an underdeveloped third world country to a fully developed country within a span of 8 years. Of course, their leader at the time was a benevolent dictator who dragged his people kicking and screaming into the 21st century. So for me, I would say if we were going to do the Olympics, we don't have to look to America, to the USA to come and help us. We should look to Malaysia because they have been successful. I don't know who they worked with to get the Commonwealth Games going here. I think they worked with South Africa because I think South Africa did the subway, the monorail or something. Yes, because I remember that time there were a lot of South Africans here. Yes, it was South Africa and Malaysia that did most of the projects for the Commonwealth Games. So I would say South Africa must work with Malaysia because Malaysia proved that they were successful when they did the Commonwealth Games. They had a plan to get the structures up, the infrastructure ready, and then continued from there. The other thing is Malaysia is a BRICS nation now. So it would be better for South Africa to do this with the BRICS nations. Why would they want to do it with the USA? Doesn't make sense, right? Just saying. Okay, let's go on. We're near the end, so don't worry. Hang in there, almost near the end, almost finished. Okay, these are the last remarks. Let's hear what he says.
Thanks for mentioning fossil fuels because we have magnificent reserves all along the coast, right from the west through to the south. Just to close off with, it seems to me that treat Trump differently and there's a big opportunity.
Treat Trump differently and also think about South Africa differently. Think about the immense potential of the South African people. You know, his executive order focused on Afrikaners, on farmers, and that drew a lot of attention. But what was really interesting about that was that Donald Trump had identified something very important, which is that South Africa's greatest asset is not its mineral wealth, but actually its people. And I think that if the South African government can remember that, as well as be a little bit nicer to Donald Trump, I think it will go a long way.
Joel Pollack is senior editor at Breitbart. I'm Alec Hogg from biznews.com.
Okay, so yeah. So this is what I wrote. This is the last thing I'm going to say. So we can work with any country, but I don't see why we should compromise our values to do so. He said they treat Trump differently. So, like, in which way? He should be treated in the same way we treat Putin and Xi Jinping. We don't have any issues with them. We conduct a lot of business with them and have very good relationships with both of them. Could it be because they don't interfere in our internal affairs and don't dictate who we can be friends with? And then he said South Africa's asset is its people. Then the people should be given an ear to voice their opinions, as I'm doing here right now, because they kept deleting my comments. And then also in general for the South African people. We, the South African people, are Africans in an African country on an African continent. We know that our government has failed us. We do want change. And we want change for the better. But is it so wrong for wanting this change on our own terms? I don't think so. So anyway, that's all I want to say about all of this. Thank you for watching. I don't know who watched because I don't know how this works. Cheers and have a good evening.